The glass shattered against the wall before anyone could stop it. Margaret Whitmore stood trembling in the center of the parlor, her hand still raised from throwing it. Her eyes were fixed on her daughter, Elena, who stood calm and quiet near the door, her small suitcase already packed. "You will not do this," Margaret said, her voice shaking with fury. "You will not throw away everything we have built for a man who owns nothing." Elena did not flinch. She had expected this. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times on sleepless nights. And now that it had finally arrived, she felt strangely steady. "His name is Daniel," she said softly, "and I love him." "Love does not pay rent," her father, Charles Whitmore, said from his armchair, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Love does not put food on the table. You are the daughter of a respected family, Elena. You had men lined up at our door. Men with property, with businesses, with futures. And you choose a mechanic who barely owns the clothes on his back." "He owns more than you think," Elena whispered, though no one heard her. Her younger sister, Grace, sat curled in the corner of the room, watching the scene unfold with wide, frightened eyes. She loved her sister, but she was too afraid of their mother to say a single word in her defense. "Everyone in this town will laugh at us," Margaret continued, pacing now, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. "They will say the Whitmore girl went mad. They will say she threw away her name, her dignity, her future, all for a poor man's smile." "Then let them laugh," Elena said, lifting her chin. "I would rather be laughed at for loving honestly than admired for lying about who I am." The room fell into a heavy silence. Charles finally lowered his newspaper and looked at his daughter properly, for the first time since she had entered the room. "If you walk out that door with him," he said slowly, "do not expect to walk back through it. Not for holidays, not for emergencies, not for anything." Elena's heart clenched, but she did not let it show on her face. She had known this would be the price. She had waited many nights, staring at the ceiling of her childhood bedroom, wondering if love was truly worth losing everything familiar. Every time, the answer came back the same. "Yes, it was worth it. I understand," she said. Margaret let out a bitter, broken laugh. "You understand nothing. You are 23 years old, and you understand nothing about the world. Poor men do not stay kind, Elena. Poverty changes people. It hardens them. It makes them desperate. One day you will come crawling back here, begging for forgiveness, and I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that we warned you." Elena picked up her suitcase. Her hands were trembling now, though she tried to hide it. She walked toward the door, and for a moment, she paused beside her sister. "Take care of yourself, Grace," she said gently. Grace reached out and squeezed her hand once, quickly, before letting go, afraid their mother would see. Elena stepped outside into the cool evening air. Daniel was waiting for her at the end of the path, leaning against an old truck that had seen better days. When he saw her, his entire face changed, softening into something warm and full of quiet relief. "You came," he said, as if he had genuinely feared she might not. "I told you I would," Elena replied, walking toward him. He took her suitcase from her hands and placed it carefully in the back of the truck, as though it held something far more precious than clothes. "Your mother?" he asked quietly. "She said I understand nothing about the world," Elena said, trying to smile, even though her eyes were shining with unshed tears. Daniel reached out and gently wiped a tear that had escaped down her cheek. His hands were rough from years of working with metal and engines, but his touch was careful, almost reverent. "I know I cannot give you the life they wanted for you," he said. "I cannot give you a big house or fine dresses or servants to attend to your every need. But I promise you this, Elena. I will work every single day to make sure you never regret choosing me." "I already don't regret it," she said, and she meant it completely. They drove away from the Whitmore estate as the sun sank low behind the hills, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Elena watched the grand house grow smaller in the side mirror until it disappeared behind a bend in the road. She did not cry again. She simply breathed in the cool air and let herself imagine the life ahead of her. News of the wedding spread through the small town of Ashwick Hollow faster than anyone expected. By the time Elena and Daniel had settled into a modest wooden house near the edge of town, the whispers had already begun. "Did you hear about the Whitmore girl?" the baker's wife said to a customer one morning. "Married a mechanic. Threw away everything for a man who can barely afford new tires." Poor thing must have lost her mind, another woman replied. Or maybe she is not as clever as everyone always said she was. Elena heard these things, of course. Ashwick Hollow was small, and word traveled through it like fire through dry grass. She heard them in the grocery store, in the way people lowered their voices but not quite enough. She heard them at church, in the sideways glances and the whispered comments behind polite smiles. She learned to hold her head high anyway. Daniel worked at the small garage on the edge of town, fixing cars and trucks for farmers and travelers passing through. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover their small home and simple meals, but he never complained. He left before sunrise and often returned after dark, his hands stained with oil, his back aching from long hours bent over engines. Elena took on small jobs of her own. She helped an elderly widow named Beatrice with sewing and mending, earning a little extra to help stretch their tight budget. She learned to cook simple, hearty meals that could feed them both without costing much. She learned to patch their clothes instead of buying new ones, to save every coin, to make do with less than she had ever known before. It was not the life she had grown up expecting. There were nights when the wind howled through gaps in the old windows, and they huddled together under thin blankets for warmth. There were weeks when money ran so low that dinner was little more than bread and broth. There were moments when Elena caught her reflection in a cracked mirror and barely recognized the tired woman looking back at her. But there were other moments too. Moments that made all the hardship feel small in comparison. There were evenings when Daniel came home exhausted, but still found the energy to pull her into a slow dance in their tiny kitchen, humming a tune under his breath, because they could not afford a radio. There were mornings when he left a single wildflower on the windowsill before heading to work, a small gesture that cost him nothing, but meant everything to her. There were quiet nights when they sat together on the porch, watching the stars, and Daniel would tell her stories, strange and wonderful stories about faraway lands and hidden kingdoms, stories he claimed his grandfather used to tell him as a child. "You tell those stories so vividly," Elena said one night, resting her head against his shoulder. "As if you lived them yourself." Daniel went quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Maybe some part of me did," he said softly, and then he changed the subject before she could ask what he meant. She noticed these small, strange moments sometimes. The way his eyes would darken briefly when certain topics came up. The way he sometimes seemed to hear things before they happened, like the crunch of gravel from a car still far down the road, or a storm rolling in long before the sky gave any sign of it. But she never questioned him too deeply. She trusted him completely, and in the quiet comfort of their small home, those little oddities felt like nothing more than the charming mysteries of the man she loved. Word of their marriage eventually reached even the farthest corners of town, and the mockery did not fade quickly. Some neighbors avoided Elena entirely, as though poverty were something contagious. Others made a show of pitying her, offering hollow words of sympathy dressed up as kindness. "You poor dear," said Mrs. Caldwell, the mayor's wife, one afternoon at the market. "Giving up such a bright future for this. I do hope you find happiness somehow." "I already have," Elena replied simply, and walked away before Mrs. Caldwell could say another word. She learned to smile through the pity and the judgment. She learned that the opinions of people who had never truly seen her heart meant very little in the end. What mattered was the warmth she felt each evening when Daniel returned home and pulled her into his arms, exhausted but happy, grateful for a life that others mocked but that felt, to them, like more than enough. Still, some nights, alone in the darkness while Daniel slept beside her, Elena found herself staring at the ceiling, wondering about the strange stories he told, the odd moments of quiet distance that crossed his face sometimes, and the faint scar on his shoulder that he never explained. She wondered who Daniel truly was beneath the calm, humble surface he presented to the world. She had no idea that the answer to that question was about to change everything. The knock at the door came just after midnight, sharp and urgent, 3 times in quick succession. Elena sat up in bed instantly, her heart pounding. Daniel was already awake beside her, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the bedroom door, as though he could see straight through the walls of their small house. "Stay here," he said quietly, his voice carrying a firmness she had rarely heard from him. "Daniel, who would be knocking at this hour?" He did not answer. He rose from the bed and moved toward the front door, with a silence that unsettled her. Daniel was not a small man, but he had always moved with a kind of gentle clumsiness around their home. bumping into furniture in the dark, laughing at himself when he stubbed his toe. Now, in the shadows of the night, he moved like something else entirely. Smooth, controlled, alert. Elena crept to the bedroom doorway and peered down the narrow hallway. She saw Daniel open the front door just a crack, revealing a tall man standing on their porch, dressed in a dark coat despite the warm summer night. "You should not be here," Daniel said, his voice low and tight. "We need you," the stranger replied. "Things are getting worse. I made my choice years ago. I am not going back. The people are suffering, Daniel. You cannot hide from this forever." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "I am not hiding. I am living." The stranger's eyes shifted past Daniel, and for a brief moment, they landed on Elena standing in the shadows of the hallway. His expression flickered with something like surprise, or perhaps pity. "Does she know?" the man asked quietly. "No," Daniel said firmly. "And she will not, unless it becomes necessary." The stranger nodded slowly, though clearly unsatisfied with the answer. "You cannot outrun who you are forever." "Watch me," Daniel replied, and shut the door. He stood there for a long moment, his hand pressed flat against the wood, his head bowed. Elena remained frozen in the hallway, unsure whether to reveal that she had witnessed the entire exchange. Finally, she stepped forward, unable to hold back her questions any longer. "Daniel, who was that man?" He turned to face her, and for a fleeting second, she saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes before he carefully smoothed it away. "An old friend," he said, "from before we met. He wanted my help with something, but I told him no. He called you by name, like he had known you a long time. He spoke of hiding, of people suffering. Daniel, what is going on?" "It is nothing you need to worry about," he said gently, closing the distance between them and wrapping his arms around her. "I promise you, Elena. Whatever is happening out there, it has nothing to do with the life we have built here. Our life is safe. Our life is simple. That is all that matters." She wanted to believe him completely. She wanted to let the warmth of his embrace erase the unease curling in her stomach. But something about the encounter lingered in her mind long after they returned to bed, long after Daniel's breathing evened out into the steady rhythm of sleep. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the strange stories he told on quiet evenings, the odd moments of unnatural stillness, the way he sometimes seemed to sense danger before it arrived, pieces of a puzzle she had never allowed herself to fully examine. Over the following weeks, small, strange things continued to happen, each one easy to dismiss on its own, but difficult to ignore when strung together. One afternoon, while Daniel was working late at the garage, Elena walked to the market to buy vegetables for dinner. As she crossed the town square, she noticed a group of men huddled near the old fountain, speaking in hushed, anxious tones. "They say the northern packs are moving again," one man whispered. "The Alpha King cannot hold the peace much longer," another replied. "Not without his brother." Elena slowed her steps, curiosity pulling at her despite herself. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the men. "What packs? What Alpha King?" The men exchanged uneasy glances, before one of them forced an awkward smile. "Just old folk tales, miss. Nothing to concern yourself with." She did not believe him, but she let it go, filing the strange comment away, with all the other small oddities accumulating around her husband's quiet, humble life. Another evening, a fierce storm rolled through Ashwick Hollow, rattling the windows and flooding the narrow dirt roads. Daniel had been out delivering a repaired truck to a farmer on the outskirts of town, and Elena paced anxiously by the window, watching the rain hammer against the glass. When he finally returned, soaked from head to toe, she rushed to him with a towel, scolding him gently for staying out so long in such weather. But as she helped him out of his drenched jacket, she noticed something that made her breath catch. A long, deep scratch ran across his forearm, still fresh, the kind of wound that looked as though it had come from claws rather than any ordinary accident. Before she could ask about it, the mark seemed to fade slightly before her eyes, the redness softening, the edges smoothing, as though it were healing far faster than any wound reasonably should. "Daniel, your arm," she said, her voice trembling. "What happened?" "I caught it on a fence post," he said quickly, pulling his sleeve down over the mark. "It looks worse than it is." She wanted to press further, but the exhaustion and worry in his eyes stopped her. She simply nodded and helped him dry off, though the image of that strange, rapidly healing wound stayed burned into her memory. Despite the growing list of unanswered questions, their life together continued in its familiar rhythm. Daniel worked long hours at the garage, coming home each night with grease-stained hands and a tired but genuine smile. Elena continued her small sewing jobs for Beatrice, and the two of them found comfort in simple pleasures. Shared meals at their small wooden table, quiet walks along the edge of town when the weather was kind, soft laughter shared over nothing important at all. She loved him deeply, and that love had not wavered, despite the whispers of the town, or the strange mysteries surrounding him. If anything, her curiosity about who he truly was only deepened her fascination with him. There was clearly more to Daniel Hart than the humble mechanic persona he presented to Ashwick Hollow, and rather than fear, Elena found herself feeling an odd sense of anticipation, as though her life was standing on the edge of something much larger than she had ever imagined. One quiet Sunday afternoon, while Daniel napped on the porch after a long week of work, Elena found an old wooden box tucked beneath a loose floorboard in their bedroom closet. She had stumbled upon it by accident while searching for a missing shoe, and curiosity got the better of her. Inside the box, she found a folded, aged photograph of a much younger Daniel standing beside a grand, unfamiliar building that resembled something between a castle and a fortress. Beside him stood another young man who bore a striking resemblance to Daniel, though his expression carried a colder, more commanding presence. Both young men wore matching pendants around their necks, engraved with the symbol of a wolf's head encircled by flames. Beneath the photograph she found a folded letter, the ink faded with age. She hesitated only a moment before unfolding it carefully. The letter was brief, but its words struck her like ice water. To my brother, the true heir. Wherever you have gone, know that the throne remains yours whenever you choose to claim it. The kingdom waits, though I fear it will not wait forever. Elena sat frozen on the bedroom floor, the letter trembling in her hands. Heir, throne, kingdom. The words swirled in her mind, refusing to align with the humble mechanic she had married, the man who fixed farm trucks and hummed quiet tunes in their tiny kitchen. She quickly folded the letter and photograph back into the box, returning it beneath the floorboard exactly as she had found it, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and overwhelming confusion. That night, as she lay beside Daniel, staring at his peaceful, sleeping face, she found herself studying him, as though seeing him for the first time. Who are you? She thought silently. Who are you truly, my love? She did not have long to wait for her answer. The following week, everything in Ashwick Hollow was about to change forever. The black cars appeared in Ashwick Hollow on a bright Tuesday morning, gliding down the narrow main street like something from another world entirely. Elena stood outside the small grocery store, a basket of vegetables balanced against her hip, watching the sleek vehicles roll past with a mixture of curiosity and unease. The townspeople paused their conversations, turning to stare as the cars came to a smooth stop in front of the town hall. Who do you suppose that is? Whispered Mrs. Caldwell, clutching her purse a little tighter. Whoever it is, her companion murmured. They clearly are not from around here. Elena watched as several tall, broad-shouldered men in dark suits stepped out of the vehicles, their movements sharp and disciplined, their eyes scanning the street with an intensity that made the hair on her arms rise. They positioned themselves around the town hall entrance, standing perfectly still, like guards awaiting someone of great importance. Then the rear door of the final car opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with sharp, commanding features and dark hair swept back neatly from his face. His presence alone seemed to command the attention of everyone on the street, an invisible weight settling over the town square the moment his polished shoes touched the pavement. He wore a dark, tailored coat despite the warm weather, and around his neck hung a pendant that caught the sunlight briefly, a wolf's head encircled by flames. Elena's breath caught. She recognized that symbol. It was the same one from the photograph hidden beneath her bedroom floorboard. Whispers rippled through the gathered crowd almost instantly. That is him, someone breathed. The Alpha King. Here? In Ashwick Hollow? Why would he come to a place like this? Elena's heart pounded as she watched the man move through the crowd with effortless authority, townspeople instinctively stepping aside to clear his path, some even lowering their heads slightly as he passed, as though some ancient instinct compelled them toward submission they did not fully understand. She hurried home as quickly as she could, her basket of vegetables forgotten, her mind racing with questions. She needed to speak with Daniel. She needed answers, and she needed them now. But when she arrived at their small house, Daniel was not there. His truck was gone, and the garage where he worked, when she rushed there next, was locked and empty. A hastily scrawled note taped to the door, explaining that the shop would be closed for the remainder of the day. Elena stood in the empty street, her heart hammering, uncertainty gnawing at her chest. Where had he gone? Did this sudden, mysterious arrival have something to do with him? She did not have to wait long for her answer. That evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, a knock sounded at her door, gentle but deliberate. When Elena opened it, she found herself face to face with one of the tall men in dark suits she had seen earlier outside the town hall. "Mrs. Hart," the man said, his voice respectful but firm. "You are requested at the town hall this evening. There is a matter of great importance that concerns your husband." "What matter?" Elena asked, her voice steadier than she felt inside. "Where is Daniel?" "All will be explained shortly, Mrs. Hart. Please, come with me." She hesitated only a moment before grabbing her shawl and following the man out into the cooling evening air. Her mind spun with possibilities as they walked toward the town hall, each more unsettling than the last. Was Daniel in danger? Had he done something wrong? Or was the truth something else entirely? Something connected to the strange letter and photograph she had discovered. The town hall had been transformed since her last visit. Long tables lined the walls, and unfamiliar guests filled the room, many dressed in the same dark, formal attire as the men who had arrived earlier that day. At the center of the room stood the man from the black car, the one the townspeople had whispered about with such reverence and fear. And beside him, to Elena's shock, stood Daniel. He was dressed differently than she had ever seen him before, in a fitted dark suit that seemed to transform him entirely. Gone was the humble, grease-stained mechanic she had married. In his place stood a man who carried himself with quiet, unmistakable authority, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. "Daniel," Elena said softly, stepping into the room. His eyes found hers instantly, softening with relief, and something that looked painfully close to guilt. "Elena," he said, moving toward her, "I am sorry. I did not want you to learn the truth this way." "What truth?" she asked, though some part of her had already begun to guess. "Daniel, what is happening? Who is that man? Why does everyone act as though he holds some kind of power over this town?" Before Daniel could answer, the tall stranger stepped forward, his sharp eyes studying Elena with open curiosity. "Forgive the intrusion into your quiet life, Mrs. Hart," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "My name is Victor. I believe you may have already guessed my relationship to your husband." Elena's gaze shifted between the two men, and for the first time, she noticed the resemblance clearly. The same sharp jawline, the same intense dark eyes, the same unmistakable presence that seemed to demand attention without effort. "Brother," she whispered, the words slipping from her lips before she could stop it. Victor's expression flickered with something like approval. "Clever, just as Daniel always said you were." "Daniel," Elena said, turning to face her husband fully, her voice shaking now with a mixture of confusion, fear, and hurt. "You told me he was an old friend. You told me it was nothing to worry about. Why did you lie to me?" Daniel's jaw tightened, pain evident in his eyes. "Because I was trying to protect the life we built together. I was trying to protect you from a world that I walked away from many years ago. A world I hoped would never find us. But it has found us," Victor interjected calmly. "And I am afraid, brother, that it can no longer be ignored." The room around them fell into a tense hush as the assembled guests watched the exchange unfold. Elena felt as though the ground beneath her had shifted entirely, the quiet, humble life she had built with Daniel suddenly revealing itself to be built upon a foundation of secrets, far larger than she could have ever imagined. "Someone needs to explain everything to me," Elena said firmly, her voice steadier now despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. "Right now." Victor studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly, a faint, approving smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Very well, Mrs. Hart. I suppose it is time you learned exactly who your husband truly is." Daniel reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly against hers, a silent plea for understanding and patience. "Elena," he said softly, "there is so much I need to tell you. So much I should have told you long before we ever exchanged our vows. I only hope, once you hear the truth, that you will not hate me for keeping it from you." Elena squeezed his hand gently, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Yet somewhere beneath the fear, a strange sense of calm settled over her. Whatever truth awaited her, she realized, she would face it exactly as she had faced every judgment and hardship since the day she chose this humble, mysterious man over everything her old life had offered. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. "I am ready." And so, surrounded by strangers in dark suits and the weight of secrets long buried, Daniel finally began to speak the truth he had hidden from her since the very first day they met. "My real name is not simply Daniel Hart," he began, his voice low but steady. "I was born Daniel Ashworth, firstborn son of the ruling family of the Hollow Moon Kingdom, a hidden world that exists alongside your own, unseen by most who walk through their ordinary lives without ever knowing it is there." Elena stood perfectly still, listening, though her mind struggled to accept the words pouring from his lips. "Our kingdom is not like the world you know," Daniel continued. "Our people carry the blood of the wolf within them. We are stronger, faster, and bound by instincts that ordinary humans do not possess. For generations, my family has ruled over our people as Alpha Kings, maintaining peace between the packs, and protecting our lands from those who would seek to claim power through force. You are saying you are some kind of—" Elena's voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "A werewolf," Victor finished for her, his tone matter-of-fact, as though the word carried none of the disbelief it should have. "Yes, Mrs. Hart. Both Daniel and myself, along with many gathered in this very room tonight, are exactly that." Elena's gaze swept across the room, taking in the assembled guests with new eyes. The unnatural stillness in their postures, the sharp, watchful intensity in their gazes, the quiet, coiled strength that seemed to radiate from each of them, despite their calm exteriors. "As the firstborn son," Daniel continued, "the throne of the Hollow Moon Kingdom was always meant to pass to me. I was raised from childhood to inherit that responsibility, trained in leadership, diplomacy, and the discipline required to command respect from packs that have fought bitter wars against one another for centuries." "Then why," Elena asked slowly, "are you here, living as a mechanic in Ashwick Hollow?" Daniel's expression darkened slightly, old pain surfacing behind his eyes. "Because I was promised, against my will, to a woman I had never met, the daughter of a rival pack leader, as part of an arrangement meant to secure peace between our territories. I was 17 years old when the agreement was made, and I had no say in the matter whatsoever." "He ran," Victor said simply, though there was no judgment in his tone, only quiet acceptance of a truth long settled between them. On the night before his formal engagement ceremony, Daniel disappeared entirely, leaving behind the crown, the kingdom, and the responsibilities that came with his birthright. "I could not marry a stranger, simply because our fathers decided it would benefit their political ambitions," Daniel said, his voice tightening with old, buried frustration. "I wanted to choose my own path. I wanted to build a life based on genuine love, rather than obligation and strategy. So I left everything behind, changed my name, and hid myself among the human world, hoping never to be found. And the throne passed to Victor instead," Elena said quietly, beginning to piece the story together. "It did," Victor confirmed. "I became Alpha King in his absence, ruling in his place these past several years, and I have managed well enough, all things considered. But recently, our kingdom has faced growing unrest. Rival packs, sensing weakness in leadership without a clear, undisputed heir standing beside me, have begun testing the boundaries of our peace. Rebellion stirs in the northern territories. Alliances that once held strong are beginning to crack." "And you need Daniel to return," Elena finished, understanding dawning fully now. "I need my brother," Victor said, his composed exterior slipping slightly, to reveal genuine worry beneath. "Whether he wears the crown or simply stands beside me as a symbol of unified strength, his return could calm the unrest, before it spirals into something far more destructive. Without him, I fear we may be looking at the beginning of a war our people have not seen in generations." The weight of Victor's words settled heavily over the room. Elena turned to Daniel, searching his face for answers to questions she had not yet found the words to ask. "Is this why that man came to our door that night?" she asked. "The one who spoke of people suffering?" Daniel nodded grimly. "Victor has sent several messengers over the past few months, each one more urgent than the last. I refused every single time, believing that our life here, the life we built together, mattered more than a crown I never wanted in the first place. But now, Elena pressed gently. Daniel's eyes met hers, filled with a painful mixture of love, guilt, and reluctant duty. Now, the situation has grown too severe to ignore any longer. Victor would not have come here personally, risking exposure to your world, unless the danger had become truly desperate. Victor stepped forward, his expression softening slightly, as he addressed Elena directly. I understand this is an enormous burden to place upon you, Mrs. Hart. You married a humble mechanic, believing your life together would remain simple and quiet. Instead, you now find yourself standing at the edge of a hidden kingdom's survival. I do not ask for your immediate acceptance of any of this. I only ask that you allow your husband the chance to help save the people he was born to protect. Elena's mind raced through the events of the past weeks. The strange scratch that had healed too quickly, the hushed conversations in the town square, the folded letter hidden beneath their bedroom floor. Every mysterious piece finally clicked into place, forming a picture far larger and more extraordinary than she ever could have imagined. If you return, she said slowly, turning back to Daniel, what happens to us, to the life we built here in Ashwick Hollow? Daniel took her hands gently in his thumbs brushing softly across her knuckles. I do not yet know exactly what the future holds, Elena, but I promise you this. Wherever this path leads, I will not walk it without you beside me. You are my wife, and nothing about that has changed, regardless of what title I may or may not carry. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely, unwilling to let her emotions overwhelm her in front of the watching crowd. Everyone back home called me a fool, she said quietly, a small, disbelieving laugh escaping her despite the gravity of the moment. They said I threw away my future by choosing a poor man with nothing to offer. Victor's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile. It appears, Mrs. Hart, that you may have chosen rather more than anyone in your old life ever realized. Elena looked around the room once more, taking in the assembled faces watching her, with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and cautious hope. Whatever judgment she had endured back in her old life suddenly felt impossibly small and distant compared to the truth now unfolding before her. What do you need from me? She asked, turning back to Victor, her voice steady and resolved despite the overwhelming uncertainty of everything she had just learned. For now, Victor said, simply your patience and your trust in your husband. The road ahead will not be easy. There are those within our kingdom who will not welcome an outsider bride, regardless of the love she carries for her husband. There are old prejudices and political tensions that will test you both in ways you cannot yet anticipate. I have already survived being disowned by my own family and mocked by an entire town for loving a man they believed was beneath me, Elena said firmly. I think I can manage a few more challenges. A ripple of quiet approval passed through the gathered crowd at her words, and even Victor's guarded expression softened further, with something close to genuine respect. Then let us begin, he said, preparing for your journey to the Hollow Moon Kingdom. Elena turned to Daniel, searching his eyes one final time for reassurance. He pulled her gently into his arms, pressing a soft kiss against her forehead. Thank you, he whispered, for choosing to stay, even now that you know the truth. I did not choose a crown, or a kingdom, or a title, Elena whispered back. I chose you, Daniel. That has not changed, no matter what world we now find ourselves standing within. As the assembled guests began preparing for their departure, Elena felt a strange mixture of fear and quiet excitement settling over her heart. Her simple, humble life in Ashwick Hollow was about to change forever, but for the first time since discovering the truth, she felt ready to face whatever awaited her, standing firmly beside the man she loved. The gates of the Hollow Moon Kingdom rose before them like something from a forgotten dream, ancient stone walls stretching high into the misty morning sky, carved with symbols Elena did not recognize but somehow felt deep within her bones. She sat beside Daniel in the back of a sleek black car, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart pounding with equal parts wonder and dread. The journey had taken nearly 2 full days, traveling through hidden roads that seemed to fold away from ordinary human maps entirely, until finally, the kingdom revealed itself, nestled deep within a valley surrounded by towering mountains. It is beautiful, Elena whispered, pressing her palm against the cool glass of the window. It is home, Daniel replied softly, though his tone carried a complicated weight of both fondness and old, unresolved pain. As the car passed through the massive gates, Elena caught her first glimpse of the kingdom's people. Tall, sharp-eyed men and women moved through the streets with the same coiled, powerful grace she had noticed among Victor's guards back in Ashwick Hollow. Children ran and played between market stalls, their laughter carrying an unusual bright energy. Elderly figures watched from doorways, their eyes following the passing car with sharp, curious interest. Word of their arrival had clearly spread ahead of them. As the vehicle rolled slowly through the main square toward the grand castle rising at the heart of the kingdom, crowds gathered along the roadside, murmuring amongst themselves. "That is him," someone whispered. "The lost prince has returned. And who is that beside him? A human woman? They say he married her in secret, out in the human world." Elena felt the weight of countless curious eyes settling upon her, and she straightened her posture instinctively, refusing to shrink beneath their scrutiny, despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. The car finally came to a stop before the towering entrance of the castle, its ancient stone walls adorned with banners bearing the same wolf and flame symbol she had seen on Daniel's family pendant. Victor stood waiting at the top of the grand staircase, flanked by several formally dressed advisors, their expressions ranging from cautious curiosity to open suspicion. As Daniel stepped out of the car and offered his hand to help Elena emerge, a hushed murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. "She smells entirely human," one advisor muttered quietly to another, loud enough for Elena to hear clearly. "No trace of wolf blood whatsoever." "An outsider bride," another added, disapproval evident in his tone. "This will not sit well with the northern packs." Elena kept her chin lifted, despite the whispered judgments swirling around her, though she felt Daniel's hand tighten protectively around hers. "Welcome to the Hollow Moon Kingdom," Victor announced formally, descending the staircase to greet them properly. "Both of you." "Thank you, Victor," Daniel replied, though his eyes swept briefly and warily across the gathered advisors, clearly sensing the tension simmering beneath their polite formality. Victor guided them into the castle, past long corridors lined with ancient tapestries, depicting battles and coronations long past. Elena tried to absorb every detail, the grandeur of her new surroundings a stark contrast to the humble wooden home she and Daniel had shared back in Ashwick Hollow. They were led into a grand meeting hall where several pack leaders had gathered, summoned specifically to witness Daniel's return. Elena recognized immediately that this was no simple family reunion. This was politics, delicate and dangerous, unfolding in real time before her eyes. "Daniel Ashworth," announced an elderly man seated at the head of the gathered council, his voice carrying the weight of long authority. "It has been many years since you abandoned your birthright and your people. Tell us, why should this council trust that your return now is anything more than convenient timing, given the current unrest plaguing our kingdom?" Daniel stepped forward, his posture straightening with a quiet authority Elena had never witnessed from him before. "I did not return to reclaim a throne I willingly gave up, Elder Marcus. I returned because my brother requested my help, and because I understand that the stability of our people matters more than any personal comfort I may have found in hiding." "And your human bride?" Another council member interjected sharply, his gaze flicking toward Elena with open distrust. "Do you intend to place an outsider beside our future leadership? Our people have never accepted human blood mixing into the royal line." Elena felt her stomach tighten, but she forced herself to remain calm and composed, refusing to let their judgment shake her resolve. "With respect," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the nerves fluttering beneath her calm exterior. "I did not ask to be placed into any position of leadership. I married Daniel because I love him, long before I knew anything about kingdoms, crowns, or ancient bloodlines. If my presence here causes concern, I understand that concern, but I will not apologize for loving my husband." A ripple of surprised murmurs swept through the gathered council at her bold response. Victor, standing quietly to the side, allowed a faint, approving smile to cross his features. "She has spirit," Elder Marcus commented, studying Elena with renewed interest. "Though spirit alone will not calm the Northern Pack's concerns regarding purity of bloodline." "The Northern Pack's concerns," Victor interjected firmly, stepping forward to address the council directly, "have far more to do with political ambition than genuine tradition. Let us not pretend otherwise. Elder Marcus, Daniel's return, regardless of his marriage, offers this kingdom stability, that has been sorely lacking in recent months. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly weighing Victor's words carefully. Finally, Elder Marcus nodded slowly, though his expression remained guarded. "Very well," he said. "The council will allow Daniel's return to be formally recognized. However, the matter of his human bride's place within royal proceedings will require further discussion before any formal acceptance can be granted." Elena felt Daniel's hand tighten reassuringly around hers as the council session concluded, the gathered leaders slowly dispersing amidst quiet, tense conversation. "That went better than I feared," Daniel murmured, once they were finally alone in the corridor outside the meeting hall. "They clearly do not trust me," Elena replied honestly, though she kept her voice light, refusing to let the lingering judgment weigh too heavily upon her. "They do not know you," Daniel corrected gently. "Trust takes time to earn, especially within a kingdom as steeped in tradition as ours. But I have faith that once they see the strength and kindness I fell in love with, their doubts will fade." Elena managed a small, tired smile, though the weight of the day's events pressed heavily upon her exhausted mind. As they walked together through the grand castle corridors toward the private chambers prepared for them, she caught sight of her own reflection in a large, ornate mirror lining the hallway. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Gone was the simple, humble wife from Ashwick Hollow, replaced by someone standing at the very edge of a hidden kingdom's uncertain future, facing judgment and suspicion from every direction, yet somehow still standing tall despite it all. That night, as Elena lay beside Daniel in the grand, unfamiliar bedroom prepared for them within the castle, she found herself staring at the elaborately carved ceiling, her mind racing with the events of the day. "Do you regret bringing me here?" she asked quietly into the darkness. Daniel turned to face her, his expression soft and unwavering, despite the day's exhausting political tensions. "Never," he said firmly. "Whatever challenges lie ahead of us, Elena, I would rather face them with you standing beside me than rule this kingdom alone." Elena allowed herself to relax slightly into his embrace, though sleep did not come easily that night. Somewhere deep within the castle, she knew, plots and schemes were already forming among those who resented her presence, and she sensed, with quiet certainty, that the true test of her strength within this hidden kingdom had only just begun. The letter arrived at the castle exactly 1 week after news of Daniel's return had spread beyond the hidden kingdom's borders, carried by a private messenger who insisted on delivering it directly into Elena's hands. She recognized her mother's elegant handwriting immediately, and her stomach twisted into a tight knot even before she broke the seal. "My dearest Elena," the letter began, and she nearly laughed bitterly at the sudden warmth in her mother's tone, so different from the cold fury that had followed her out the door months earlier. "We have heard the most remarkable news about Daniel's true heritage, and we simply cannot express how proud we are of the wise choice you made in marrying him. Your father and I would love nothing more than to reconnect and celebrate this wonderful turn of events together as a family." Elena set the letter down on the small writing desk in her castle chambers, her hands trembling slightly, though not from sadness this time. Anger simmered quietly beneath her calm exterior, sharp and unexpected. "What is it?" Daniel asked, noticing the tension in her shoulders as he entered the room. "My mother," Elena said flatly, gesturing toward the letter. "Apparently, love and wisdom look very different once poverty transforms into royalty." Daniel picked up the letter, scanning it quickly, before setting it back down with a disapproving frown. "Do you want to respond?" "I do not know," Elena admitted honestly. "Part of me wants nothing more to do with them after everything they said, but another part of me wonders if this could be a chance to finally mend things, even if their reasons for reaching out are far from pure." Before Daniel could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Victor entered, holding a second letter, his expression carefully neutral. "This arrived as well," he said, handing it to Elena. "From your sister, it appears." Elena opened the second letter carefully, and unlike her mother's carefully worded, self-serving message, Grace's words felt genuine and raw. "Elena, I am so sorry for staying silent when Mother and Father turned you away. I was frightened, and I regret that fear more than I can properly express. I do not care about crowns or kingdoms. I only care that my sister is safe and happy. Please, if you are willing, I would love the chance to see you again, even if only briefly." Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she read her sister's heartfelt words, so different from the shallow excitement radiating from her mother's letter. "Grace," she murmured softly, "she truly means this." "Then perhaps," Daniel suggested gently, "there is room to reconnect with her, even if your parents' motives remain questionable." Elena nodded slowly, folding both letters carefully. "I will write back to Grace immediately. As for my parents," she paused, considering her words carefully, "I think it is time they understood exactly why I chose the life I did, long before any crown or kingdom entered the picture." That evening, Elena composed a careful, measured response to her mother, expressing gratitude for the reconnection, while gently but firmly addressing the painful words spoken the night she left home. She did not seek to shame her parents, but she refused to allow them to rewrite history simply because circumstances had changed in her favor. Several days later, her parents arrived at the kingdom's outer gates, having traveled the long journey specifically to see her. Elena met them in a private courtyard garden, away from the watchful eyes and judgment of the castle's council members. Margaret Whitmore looked noticeably different than the furious woman who had thrown a glass against the parlor wall months earlier. Her expression now carried careful, practiced warmth, though Elena recognized the calculation hiding just beneath the surface. "Elena, darling," Margaret said, reaching out as though to embrace her. Elena stepped back slightly, holding up a gentle but firm hand. "Before anything else, Mother, I need you to understand something clearly. I did not marry Daniel because I secretly hoped he was royalty in disguise. I married him believing wholeheartedly that he was a poor mechanic, with nothing but love to offer me. That love was enough for me then, and it remains enough for me now, regardless of the crown that has since found its way back into his life." Margaret's carefully composed expression faltered slightly. "Of course, darling. I simply meant—" "I know what you meant," Elena interrupted gently but firmly. "And I forgive you. Truly. Because holding on to anger serves no one. But I need you both to understand that my worth, and the worth of this marriage, was never dependent on wealth or status. If you cannot accept that truth, then perhaps it would be best if we kept our distance, regardless of titles or crowns." Charles Whitmore, standing quietly beside his wife, finally spoke, his voice heavier, with genuine regret, than Elena had ever heard from him before. "You are right to hold us accountable, Elena. We judged you unfairly, and no royal title changes the fact that we were wrong to do so. I am sorry, truly and completely, for the pain we caused you." Elena studied her father's face carefully, searching for sincerity beneath his words, and found it, buried beneath years of pride finally beginning to crack. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "It means more than you know." The reconciliation was not instantaneous or perfect. Old wounds did not vanish overnight, simply because of a heartfelt apology. But it marked a beginning, a small, fragile bridge rebuilding itself across the distance that had separated them for so long. Grace arrived separately the following week, and unlike the careful, measured reunion with her parents, Elena's reunion with her sister was immediate and warm, filled with genuine tears and long overdue embraces. "I should have stood up for you that night," Grace said, clutching Elena's hands tightly. "I have regretted my silence every single day since." "You were young and frightened," Elena said gently. "I forgive you completely, Grace." Truly. As the sisters walked together through the castle gardens, catching up on months of separation, Elena found herself reflecting on how much her life had transformed since that painful night in the Whitmore parlor. She had been called a fool for choosing love over wealth, and yet here she stood, within the walls of a hidden kingdom, having gained far more than any fortune could have ever offered her. But even as her personal relationships began healing, the political tensions within the Hollow Moon Kingdom continued simmering dangerously beneath the surface. Reports from the Northern Territories grew increasingly troubling with each passing day, whispers of rebellion growing louder, and Elena sensed that the true test of her strength and her place within this hidden world had only just begun to unfold. That evening, as she stood beside Daniel on the balcony overlooking the moonlit kingdom below, she voiced the concern weighing heavily on her mind. "The council still does not fully accept me," she said quietly, "and now, with rebellion stirring in the north, I worry that my presence here may complicate matters further for you and Victor." Daniel wrapped his arm gently around her shoulders, pulling her close against the cool night air. "Whatever challenges arise, Elena, we will face them together. You have already proven your strength, time and time again, far beyond what any of them realize. I have faith that soon, the entire kingdom will see exactly what I have always known about you. Elena leaned into his warmth, drawing quiet strength from his unwavering confidence, though deep within her heart, she sensed that the greatest challenges of her new life were still waiting just beyond the horizon. The messenger arrived at dawn, his clothes torn and his face pale with exhaustion, collapsing at the castle gates before the guards could even reach him. Elena watched from her chamber window as servants rushed the injured man inside, his urgent, panicked words carrying faintly up through the courtyard. "The Northern Pacts have broken the peace agreement," he gasped, before finally losing consciousness in the arms of the castle healers. Within the hour, Victor had summoned Daniel and Elena to the Grand Council chamber, his expression tighter and more anxious than Elena had ever witnessed from him before. "They attacked one of our border villages last night," Victor explained grimly, pacing before the assembled council members. "Several homes burned, families displaced. This was not a random act of aggression. This was a deliberate message." "A message meaning what exactly?" Daniel asked, his jaw tightening with barely restrained anger. "That they no longer respect the authority of this throne," Elder Marcus answered gravely from his seat at the council table. "They sense weakness in our leadership, and they intend to exploit it fully before we can respond." Elena watched the exchange unfold, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. This was no longer simply a matter of political tension simmering quietly beneath the surface. This was the beginning of open conflict, threatening to tear the entire kingdom apart. "We cannot allow this aggression to continue unanswered," Victor said firmly. "But a full military response risks igniting the very war we have worked so hard to prevent all these years." "Then what do you propose?" another council member asked sharply. Victor's gaze shifted toward Daniel, a silent, heavy request passing between the brothers. "I propose that Daniel and I travel personally to meet with the Northern Pack leaders, to negotiate directly, before matters escalate any further." "That is far too dangerous," Elder Marcus objected immediately. "The Northern Packs have already shown their willingness toward violence. Walking directly into their territory could very well be a trap." "Perhaps," Victor acknowledged calmly, "but allowing this rebellion to fester unchecked poses an even greater danger to our people in the long run." Elena listened carefully to the tense debate unfolding before her, and despite the fear tightening in her chest, she found herself stepping forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "I would like to accompany them," she said clearly, drawing surprised gazes from every corner of the room. "Absolutely not," Daniel said immediately, turning toward her with obvious alarm. "Elena, this is far too dangerous." "With respect, Daniel," Elena replied steadily, "I have already proven that I am not someone who shies away from difficult circumstances. And perhaps, given how deeply skeptical this council remains about my presence here, showing genuine solidarity and courage in this moment could help demonstrate exactly why I belong within this kingdom." Victor studied her thoughtfully for a long moment before speaking. "She raises a valid point, Daniel. The Northern Pacts place great value on demonstrated courage and loyalty. Elena's willingness to stand beside us during these negotiations could carry significant symbolic weight." Daniel's expression remained deeply conflicted, torn between his instinct to protect his wife and the political reality Victor had just outlined. Finally, he sighed heavily, though his eyes carried a fierce, protective determination. "If you insist on joining us," he said quietly, "you will remain close to my side at all times." "I would not dream of straying," Elena replied, offering him a small, reassuring smile, despite the anxious flutter in her own stomach. The journey toward the Northern Territories took the better part of 2 days, traveling through increasingly rugged, mountainous terrain that grew colder and more unwelcoming with every passing mile. Elena kept close to Daniel throughout the journey, watching the tension building steadily in his shoulders as they drew nearer to their destination. Finally, they arrived at a heavily fortified outpost nestled deep within the northern mountains, the gathered Northern Pack leaders waiting with expressions ranging from cold suspicion to outright hostility. Alpha King Victor greeted a broad, scarred man who appeared to lead the assembled northern delegation, and the long-lost prince returns as well. "How convenient, considering our current grievances." "Chief Halvard," Victor replied evenly, though Elena noticed the careful tension underlying his calm exterior. "We have come to discuss the recent attack on our border village, and to find a peaceful resolution before matters escalate any further. Peaceful resolution, Halvard repeated, his tone dripping with quiet mockery. Your throne has grown weak and complacent, Victor. Perhaps it is time new leadership emerged from among the Pax who still remember what true strength looks like. The tension in the room thickened noticeably, several of the gathered northern warriors shifting subtly into more aggressive postures. Elena felt Daniel tense beside her, his hand instinctively moving slightly in front of her protectively. If strength is truly your concern, Daniel said calmly, stepping forward despite the obvious danger, then perhaps you should consider that true strength lies not in senseless violence against innocent villagers, but in the discipline required to maintain peace, despite personal grievances. Halvard's eyes narrowed sharply. And who exactly are you, to lecture me on discipline, Prince? You abandoned your kingdom the moment personal comfort mattered more to you than duty. I made mistakes in my past, Daniel acknowledged steadily, refusing to back down, despite the provocation. But I have returned now, precisely because I understand the weight of the responsibility I once ran from. I will not allow innocent lives to suffer, simply because ambitious leaders wish to exploit political uncertainty. The room fell into a tense, heavy silence, as Halvard studied Daniel carefully, clearly recalculating his approach, given the unexpected firmness in the returned prince's demeanor. Elena, sensing an opportunity within the tense standoff, stepped forward as well, drawing surprised and curious glances from the gathered northern warriors. Chief Halvard, she said clearly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I understand that trust has been broken between your people and the throne. But senseless violence against innocent families will not restore that trust. It will only deepen the wounds dividing us further. And why should we listen to the words of a human woman who has no true understanding of our ways? One of Halvard's advisors sneered dismissively. Because, Elena replied firmly, refusing to shrink beneath his scorn, I understand what it feels like to be underestimated and dismissed, simply because of where I come from. I was called a fool for the choices I made in my own life, judged harshly by those who believed status and wealth mattered more than genuine character. Yet here I stand today, having proven that judgment wrong. Perhaps, Chief Halvard, your people deserve the chance to prove their own judgments wrong as well, rather than resorting to violence that will only confirm the very weaknesses you claim to despise. A long, heavy silence followed her words, the northern warriors exchanging uncertain glances among themselves. Finally, Halvard's stern expression softened slightly, a grudging respect flickering behind his hardened eyes. You speak with surprising conviction, for an outsider, he said slowly. I speak with the conviction of someone who understands sacrifice and genuine loyalty, Elena replied, qualities I believe your people value deeply as well. Halvard studied her for a long, considering moment before turning his attention back toward Victor and Daniel. Perhaps, he said gruffly, there is room for further discussion before matters escalate beyond repair. Victor stepped forward immediately, seizing the fragile opening Elena's words had created. Then let us begin those discussions now, Chief Halvard, before more innocent lives are lost unnecessarily. As the tense negotiations slowly began shifting toward a more productive tone, Daniel glanced toward Elena with a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet awe evident in his expression. You may have just prevented a war, he whispered softly. Elena allowed herself a small, exhausted smile, though her heart still pounded fiercely from the tension of the confrontation. I simply told them the truth, she replied. Sometimes, that is all it takes to shift the course of events. As the negotiations continued late into the evening, Elena felt a quiet, growing confidence settling over her, a sense that perhaps her place within this hidden kingdom was not as uncertain as she had once feared. She had faced judgment before, and she had proven herself capable of overcoming it. Now, standing at the heart of a fragile peace negotiation, she began to realize that her strength and conviction might prove to be exactly what this kingdom needed most. The peace agreement with Chief Halvard's people held for exactly 11 days before the first signs of betrayal began surfacing within the castle walls themselves. Elena noticed it first during a quiet evening meal, a subtle shift in the demeanor of one of the castle's senior advisors, a sharp-eyed man named Aldrich who had always treated her with cold, distant formality since her arrival. That evening, however, his usual coldness carried an edge of nervous calculation that immediately set her instincts on alert. Is something troubling you, Aldrich? She asked carefully, watching him closely across the long dining table. Nothing at all, Mrs. Hart, he replied smoothly, though his eyes flickered briefly toward Victor before returning to his meal. Simply weary from the day's council matters. Elena said nothing further, but she filed the strange interaction away carefully, her earlier experiences having taught her the value of paying close attention to small, seemingly insignificant details. Later that night, unable to sleep, she wandered quietly through the castle's dimly lit corridors, her mind restless with unspoken concerns. As she passed near Victor's private study, she overheard hushed voices speaking urgently from within, the door left slightly ajar. The Northern Peace Agreement threatens everything we have worked toward, Aldrich's voice hissed quietly. If Daniel and his human bride continue gaining favor among the Pax, our plans will collapse entirely. Patience, replied a second voice, one Elena did not immediately recognize. The council remains divided over the question of succession. If we can convince enough members that Daniel's return, and his outsider marriage, poses a genuine threat to tradition, we may yet secure the throne for ourselves. Elena's breath caught sharply in her throat. She pressed herself carefully against the shadows of the corridor, straining to hear more of the treacherous conversation unfolding just beyond the study door. And Victor? Aldrich asked. He remains a significant obstacle. Victor's loyalty to his brother will prove his downfall eventually, the second voice replied coldly. When the time comes, we will ensure that blame for any unfortunate incident falls squarely upon the Northern Pax, reigniting tensions that will conveniently eliminate both brothers from contention. Elena's heart pounded fiercely as the full weight of the conspiracy settled over her. Someone within the castle itself was plotting against both Daniel and Victor, and it was clear that whoever stood behind this scheme intended to use the fragile peace with the Northern Pax as a weapon to eliminate the rightful leadership entirely. She hurried back toward her chambers, her mind racing to process what she had just overheard. She needed to warn Daniel immediately, but caution held her steady footsteps in check. If the conspiracy ran deeper within the castle than she realized, revealing her knowledge too quickly could place both herself and Daniel in even greater danger. The following morning, Elena found a private moment alone with Daniel in their chambers, quickly relaying everything she had overheard the previous night. Daniel's expression darkened considerably as she spoke, his jaw tightening with barely restrained anger. Aldrich, he said grimly. I should have suspected his loyalty long before now. He has always harbored quiet ambitions toward greater influence within the council. But who was the second voice? Elena asked. Someone with enough influence to potentially frame the Northern Pax and eliminate you both from succession. Daniel's expression grew troubled as he considered the possibilities carefully. There are only a handful of council members with that level of authority and access. We must proceed carefully, Elena. If we accuse the wrong individual without solid proof, we risk alerting the true conspirators and driving their plans further into hiding. They agreed to bring their suspicions carefully to Victor, trusting his judgment and authority to help navigate the delicate situation without exposing Elena's secret knowledge too openly. Victor listened intently as they relayed the overheard conversation, his expression growing increasingly grim with every detail. This confirms suspicions I have harbored privately for some time, he admitted finally. There have been strange irregularities within the council's recent decisions, votes shifting unexpectedly, information leaking to unexpected sources. I simply lacked concrete evidence until now. What do you propose we do? Daniel asked. Victor considered carefully before responding. We must catch them in the act, rather than relying solely on overheard conversations that could easily be denied or dismissed. I propose we set a careful trap, allowing false information regarding a supposed weakness in the Northern Peace Agreement to circulate quietly among the council, then observe closely who acts upon that false information. Over the following days, Victor carefully orchestrated a subtle deception, allowing whispers to circulate that a critical vulnerability existed within the recent peace negotiations, one that could potentially be exploited to reignite conflict with the Northern Pax if leaked at precisely the right moment. Elena found herself playing a delicate, dangerous role within the unfolding scheme, maintaining careful, polite interactions with Aldrich and the other suspected council members, all while masking the fear and tension simmering beneath her calm exterior. Finally, nearly a week after the trap had been carefully set, Victor's private guards intercepted a coded message being smuggled out of the castle, addressed directly to representatives among the northern packs, containing the fabricated information exactly as Victor had planned. The message, once decoded, revealed the identity of the second conspirator clearly. Elder Marcus, the very council member who had first challenged Daniel's return and questioned Elena's place within royal proceedings, stood revealed as the mastermind behind the treacherous plot. Elder Marcus, Victor said grimly, staring at the intercepted message with quiet fury. I should have suspected his ambition ran deeper than mere skepticism toward tradition. That evening, Victor called an emergency council session, presenting the intercepted evidence before the assembled leadership. Elder Marcus's carefully composed expression crumbled the moment the message was revealed, his eyes darting nervously toward the exits as castle guards moved swiftly to detain him. You would have sacrificed innocent lives, Daniel said coldly, reigniting a war that nearly cost countless families their homes and safety, simply to secure personal ambition. The kingdom deserves stronger leadership than a runaway prince and his human bride, Elder Marcus spat bitterly, even as guards restrained him firmly. You abandoned your duty once already, Daniel. What guarantee do we have that you will not do so again, the moment circumstances grow difficult? The guarantee, Elena said, stepping forward with quiet, unwavering conviction, lies in the fact that Daniel returned precisely when his people needed him most, despite every personal sacrifice that decision required. Unlike you, Elder Marcus, who chose personal ambition over the safety and stability of the very people you swore to protect. A heavy, stunned silence followed her words, the assembled council members exchanging uneasy but increasingly respectful glances toward Elena. As guards led the disgraced elder away to face formal judgment, Victor turned toward Daniel and Elena, his expression finally relaxing slightly with quiet relief. This conspiracy could have torn our kingdom apart entirely, he said softly. Thank you both, for your courage in bringing it to light. We simply did what needed to be done, Daniel replied, his arm wrapping protectively around Elena's shoulders. As the council session concluded and the gathered leaders slowly dispersed, murmuring quietly amongst themselves about the shocking revelations of betrayal within their own ranks, Elena felt a profound sense of accomplishment settling over her exhausted heart. She had faced judgment, suspicion, and open hostility since arriving within the Hollow Moon Kingdom. Yet time and again, she had proven her strength, her loyalty, and her genuine dedication toward the people and the kingdom she had come to call her new home. Perhaps, she realized quietly, as she walked hand in hand with Daniel back toward their private chambers, the true test of her worth had never been about titles, wealth, or bloodlines at all. It had always been about the strength of her character, revealed clearly through the choices she made when circumstances grew most difficult. And as whispers began circulating throughout the kingdom regarding her courage in uncovering the treacherous plot, Elena sensed that the doubts and suspicions that had once surrounded her arrival were finally beginning to shift into something resembling genuine respect and admiration. The formal trial of Elder Marcus drew a crowd unlike anything Elena had witnessed since her arrival within the Hollow Moon Kingdom. The Grand Council Hall packed tightly with pack leaders, advisors, and curious citizens eager to witness the conclusion of the scandal that had rocked their kingdom's leadership. Elena sat quietly beside Daniel, watching as the disgraced elder stood before the assembled council, his once proud posture now hollow and defeated. Elder Marcus, Victor announced formally, his voice carrying clearly throughout the silent hall. You stand accused of conspiring against the rightful leadership of this kingdom, deliberately attempting to reignite conflict with the northern packs, for the sake of personal ambition. How do you answer these charges? Marcus remained silent for a long moment, his eyes sweeping briefly across the gathered crowd, before finally settling on Daniel and Elena. I answer, he said finally, his voice bitter but resigned, that I acted out of genuine concern for the traditions and stability of our kingdom. Daniel abandoned his birthright once already. I feared history repeating itself, with even greater consequences given his marriage to an outsider. Your concerns, Victor replied coldly, do not excuse treachery, Elder Marcus. Innocent lives were nearly lost due to your reckless ambition. The council deliberated briefly before delivering their verdict, stripping Marcus of his position and exiling him from the kingdom's borders entirely, a fate considered severe, but merciful, given the potential consequences of his actions. As the trial concluded and the hall slowly emptied, Elena found herself approached by several council members who had previously regarded her with open suspicion and hostility. Mrs. Hart greeted an elderly woman named Councillor Wren, one of the more traditional voices within the council, who had initially voiced strong reservations regarding Elena's presence. "I owe you an apology. Your courage in uncovering this conspiracy, and your wisdom during the northern negotiations, has proven that bloodline alone does not determine one's worth within leadership." Elena accepted the apology graciously, though she remained humble in her response. "Thank you, Councillor Wren. I understand the importance of your traditions, and I hope, in time, to prove myself a worthy addition to this kingdom's future, regardless of my human heritage." Over the following weeks, Elena found herself increasingly involved in the daily governance of the kingdom. Her insights and perspectives, sought after by council members who had once dismissed her entirely. She worked closely alongside Daniel and Victor, helping mediate disputes between rival pacts, offering fresh perspectives on matters of trade and diplomacy that drew from her own humble upbringing and understanding of hardship. One particular matter arose, involving a dispute between two smaller pacts regarding shared farming territories along their border. The disagreement had escalated into a tense standoff, each side unwilling to compromise, despite the obvious mutual benefit of continued cooperation. "Perhaps," Elena suggested during a council session addressing the dispute, "rather than dividing the territories strictly between the two pacts, we could propose a shared agricultural system, allowing both communities to work the land together, splitting resources and labor evenly. I have seen firsthand, in my own humble upbringing, how shared hardship and cooperative effort can build far stronger bonds than strict division ever could." The council considered her proposal carefully, and after further discussion, both disputing pacts agreed to implement Elena's suggested compromise, resolving months of escalating tension through practical, thoughtful diplomacy rather than force or division. "You continue to surprise this council," Victor commented warmly after the session concluded. "Your perspective, shaped by genuine hardship rather than privilege, offers solutions that many of us, raised solely within positions of power, often overlook entirely." Elena smiled softly at his words. "I suppose being called a fool by those who valued wealth over character taught me to see value in places others often overlook." As months passed, Elena's reputation within the Hollow Moon Kingdom continued to grow, no longer whispered about with suspicion or pity, but rather with genuine respect and quiet admiration. Even Chief Halvard, upon a formal diplomatic visit to the castle regarding continued peace efforts, greeted her with newfound warmth. "The human bride who prevented a war," he said with a faint, approving smile. "It seems the kingdom owes you a debt of gratitude, Mrs. Hart." "I simply spoke honestly," Elena replied humbly. "Sometimes, that is all peace truly requires." Despite her growing acceptance and influence, Elena remained deeply connected to the humble values that had shaped her earlier life. She insisted on regularly visiting the kingdom's smaller villages, listening directly to the concerns of ordinary citizens, rather than relying solely on filtered reports from council advisors. She established a modest program providing support to struggling families within the kingdom, drawing from her own memories of hardship during her early days with Daniel in Ashwick Hollow. "You could easily forget where you came from," Daniel observed one evening, watching her carefully review reports detailing the needs of several struggling villages. "Yet you continue prioritizing the well-being of ordinary citizens above all else." "I will never forget," Elena replied firmly. "Those difficult years taught me everything I needed to understand about genuine strength and resilience. I intend to use those lessons to help build a kingdom that values its people, regardless of their status or wealth." As Elena's influence within the kingdom continued growing, so too did the quiet, unspoken understanding among the council and citizens alike that she had truly earned her place beside Daniel, not through bloodline or privilege, but through genuine character, wisdom, and unwavering dedication toward the people she now called her own. One evening, as Elena and Daniel walked together through the castle gardens beneath a clear, star-filled sky, Victor approached them with news that would soon reshape the kingdom's future entirely. "The council has reached a unanimous decision," he announced, his expression carrying a mixture of solemnity and quiet pride. "Given the recent trials our kingdom has faced, and the leadership both of you have demonstrated throughout, They have formally requested that Daniel reclaim his rightful place as Alpha King, with Elena standing beside him as queen. Elena's breath caught sharply at the unexpected announcement, her heart pounding with a mixture of surprise, humility, and quiet, overwhelming pride. "Victor," Daniel said carefully, "you have ruled this kingdom faithfully all these years. Are you certain you wish to step aside now?" Victor's expression softened into a genuine warm smile. "I have never sought the throne out of personal ambition, brother. I ruled only because circumstances required it in your absence. Now that you have returned, proving yourself far beyond anyone's expectations, alongside a wife whose wisdom and strength have benefited this kingdom immeasurably, I can think of no greater honor than stepping aside, allowing the rightful heir to finally claim his true place." Elena turned to Daniel, searching his eyes carefully. "Is this truly what you want?" Daniel considered her question seriously before responding. "I once ran from this responsibility, believing personal happiness and duty could never coexist. But you have shown me, Elena, through your strength and unwavering character, that perhaps genuine happiness and meaningful duty can indeed walk hand in hand, so long as we walk that path together." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes, though this time, they carried none of the fear or uncertainty of her earlier days within the kingdom. Instead, they carried a profound sense of gratitude and quiet joy. "Then let us walk that path together," she said softly, "exactly as we always have." As the kingdom prepared for the historic coronation ceremony that would soon follow, word of the upcoming celebration spread rapidly throughout the Hollow Moon Kingdom and beyond, reaching even the ordinary human world Elena had once called home. And as preparations began for the grand ceremony ahead, Elena found herself reflecting quietly on the incredible journey that had brought her from a disowned daughter, mocked for choosing love over wealth, to the threshold of becoming queen of a hidden kingdom she now called home. The morning of the coronation arrived bright and clear, the entire Hollow Moon Kingdom gathering within the grand castle courtyard to witness the historic ceremony that would formally restore Daniel to his rightful place as Alpha King, with Elena standing proudly beside him as queen. Elena stood quietly in her private chambers, studying her reflection in the tall, ornate mirror one final time before the ceremony began. The elegant gown she wore, crafted from deep midnight blue fabric embroidered delicately with silver thread resembling stars, felt worlds away from the simple, patched clothing she had worn during her humble early days with Daniel in Ashwick Hollow. Yet despite the grandeur surrounding her, Elena recognized clearly that the woman staring back at her remained fundamentally unchanged at her core. She had not transformed into someone new, simply because of the crown about to be placed upon her head. She remained the same woman who had once chosen love over wealth, who had endured mockery and judgment with quiet dignity, who had proven her worth not through birthright, but through genuine character and unwavering resilience. A soft knock interrupted her reflection, and Grace entered quietly, her eyes shining with proud, happy tears. "You look absolutely radiant," Grace said softly, embracing her sister gently. "Thank you for being here," Elena replied, squeezing her sister's hands warmly. Their parents had also traveled to witness the historic ceremony, their relationship with Elena continuing to heal, slowly but steadily in the months since their initial, awkward reconciliation. Margaret Whitmore, standing quietly nearby, offered Elena a small, genuine smile, free now of the calculating undertones that had colored their earlier reunion. "I am proud of you, Elena," Margaret said softly, "truly and completely proud, regardless of crowns or titles." Elena felt her heart soften at her mother's words, recognizing the genuine growth reflected within them. "Thank you, Mother," she replied warmly. As the appointed hour finally arrived, Elena made her way toward the grand courtyard, where thousands of citizens had gathered eagerly, their excited murmurs quieting into reverent silence as she appeared. Daniel waited for her at the base of the ceremonial platform, dressed formally in deep royal colors, his expression carrying a mixture of solemn responsibility and quiet, overwhelming love as their eyes met across the crowded courtyard. "Ready?" he whispered softly as she reached his side. "With you," Elena replied simply, "always." Together, they ascended the ceremonial platform, where Victor waited to formally conduct the coronation ceremony, alongside Elder Wren and the remaining council members, who had once doubted Elena's worth, but now stood proudly in support of her new role. "People of the Hollow Moon Kingdom," Victor announced, his voice carrying clearly across the silent, attentive crowd. "Today, we witness the restoration of our rightful Alpha King, Daniel Ashworth, alongside his queen, Elena Ashworth, whose courage, wisdom, and unwavering dedication have proven, time and again, that true worth lies not within bloodlines or birthright, but within genuine strength of character." A resounding cheer erupted from the gathered crowd, filling the courtyard with an overwhelming wave of joyful celebration. Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes as she looked out across the sea of smiling faces, citizens who had once whispered doubtfully about her presence, now cheering enthusiastically in genuine, heartfelt support. Victor carefully placed the ceremonial crown upon Daniel's head, followed swiftly by a smaller, elegantly crafted crown, placed gently upon Elena's own. As the crown settled into place, the crowd's cheering intensified further, echoing loudly across the kingdom's ancient stone walls. "Long live King Daniel and Queen Elena," the crowd chanted joyfully. "Long live the king and queen." Elena turned toward Daniel, overwhelmed by the profound weight and beauty of the moment unfolding around them. He reached for her hand gently, lifting it toward the cheering crowd in a united display of leadership and partnership. "Do you remember," Daniel whispered softly, beneath the roaring celebration, "the night your mother called you a fool for choosing me?" Elena laughed softly through her happy tears. "I remember every word clearly." "I wonder," Daniel continued, a playful, loving smile touching his lips, "what she would say now, watching her daughter, the supposed fool, crowned queen of an entire hidden kingdom." "I imagine," Elena replied warmly, glancing briefly toward her mother, standing proudly among the cheering crowd, tears of genuine happiness streaming freely down her face. She would say that love, in the end, was never foolish at all. As the celebration continued late into the evening, filled with joyous music, laughter, and heartfelt toasts honoring their new king and queen, Elena found herself reflecting quietly on the incredible journey that had led her to this remarkable moment. She thought of the humble wooden house in Ashwick Hollow, where she and Daniel had built their first life together, surviving on love alone despite the harsh judgments surrounding them. She thought of the painful night she had walked away from her family's estate, uncertain, but resolute in her choice to follow her heart rather than convention. She thought of every whispered insult, every pitying glance, every moment of doubt she had endured throughout her journey, and how each had ultimately strengthened her resolve rather than breaking her spirit. Now, standing proudly as queen beside the man she loved, surrounded by a kingdom that had grown to respect and admire her genuine strength and wisdom, Elena understood clearly that her journey had never truly been about proving her worth to others. It had always been about remaining true to her own heart, regardless of the judgment or doubt surrounding her choices. Later that evening, as the celebrations began winding down and the kingdom settled into peaceful rest beneath a brilliant canopy of stars, Elena and Daniel stood quietly together upon their private balcony, overlooking the joyful glow of lanterns still lighting the courtyard below. "Any regrets?" Daniel asked softly, wrapping his arms gently around her from behind. Elena leaned back contentedly into his embrace, watching the peaceful kingdom stretched out before them. "Not a single one," she replied honestly. "Every hardship, every judgment, every moment of uncertainty led us exactly here, to this beautiful, unexpected life we now share together." Daniel pressed a soft, loving kiss against her temple. "They called you a fool," he murmured quietly, "for choosing a poor man with nothing to offer." "They were wrong," Elena whispered back, smiling softly into the peaceful night. "You had everything to offer, Daniel. Everything that ever truly mattered." And as the kingdom rested peacefully below them, safe and unified beneath their newfound leadership, Elena finally allowed herself to fully embrace the profound truth she had discovered throughout her extraordinary journey. Love, chosen freely and courageously despite judgment and uncertainty, would always prove itself the greatest treasure of all, far more valuable than any crown, any fortune, or any title the world could ever offer. The girl once mocked as a fool for her choices had become a queen, not because a crown had been placed upon her head, but because she had never once wavered from the strength, courage, and genuine love that had defined her heart from the very beginning.